Welcome to Post-Gazette Live. I am Paul Zeise. We do it every single day. For the most part, we talk all things Pittsburgh sports. We've talked a lot about the Steelers, obviously, and we've talked a lot about the Steelers over the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think one of the things that is always important when we talk about the Steelers is to look at the big picture and look at what each game means and what the Steelers are trying to do and where they fit and all that other good stuff. So we'll start today with this game against the Ravens. And I think one of the most interesting things when we talk about this game is that it's far more important for the Ravens than it is the Steelers even. And I think it was Ray Fittipaldo today laid it out pretty clearly. The Steelers can win the division even if they lose this game. Whereas it's different if you're the Ravens, you have to win this game just to clinch a playoff berth, and then you have to win this game in order to be able to put yourself in a position where you are going to be able to go out and win the division. But you still are going to need some help from the Steelers. And I think that's the most critical piece, really, to this weekend, is that it's obviously very important for the Steelers to win. They win the division, and, they get a home game and all the other stuff we talked about. They get to a point where they get 2 weeks, basically, to get ready for the playoffs. They know they're going to have a home game. They're pretty sure it's going to be Denver or the Chargers, who they will play. And quite frankly, that's why it's really crucial for the Steelers. But they're already in the playoffs, number one. And number two, they can still win the AFC North even if they lose this game, if they just win their last 2 games. And why that's important is it might give you some context, whereas with respect to the Ravens, this game is their season in many ways. I mean, they're going to make the playoffs, but reality is if they want a chance to win the AFC North, just a chance, they have to win this game. The stakes are high for both teams, but I think that the Ravens are far more desperate than the Steelers are in this game. That could translate into the way the game plays out. It might not. But reality here is, if you look at the game and the way that it's going to play out, I think the Ravens are going to have to pull out all of the stops to try and win the game. That's what's going to be interesting to me, to just kind of see how it sort of plays itself out. Again, it's so much different when one team has so much riding on a game and the other team has, a lot riding on a game, but not near as much. It's one of those things where the Steelers late in the game, they know, okay, well, if we lose this game, which we don't want to, but if we lose this game, we win our next 2, we still win the AFC North. That's a completely different, and we're already in the playoffs. That's a completely different situation than the Ravens, who basically need to win this game to clinch a playoff berth. And if they don't, then they'll have to go next week and try and win next week or whatever in order to finally get a playoff berth. And the other part of it is, if this is a loss for the Ravens, it gives them 6 losses. And if you look at the way that the back end of the playoffs are going to play out, it's entirely possible that they could fall to like the 7 seed. And not be the 5 seed, but probably the 6 seed, because I think the Chargers probably are going to finish 10-7, I guess it would be. So the Ravens would probably have to lose again, but I think the Broncos, if they're not careful, and I'm talking about if the Ravens aren't careful, the Broncos could actually jump over them. Then it becomes kind of interesting for the Steelers, because if the Broncos were to jump the Ravens, the Steelers would probably have to play the Ravens a 3rd time, only this time in the playoffs. So I think that it's important to note that. It's a very important fact to note, is that the Steelers obviously have a lot riding on this game, but not as much as the Ravens do. If the Ravens win, then all of a sudden they can start worrying about something else. They could start trying to figure out if, maybe the Chiefs help them out and the Chiefs beat the Steelers on Christmas Day. And now all of a sudden the Ravens are in control of the AFC North. But I just don't think that is necessarily one of those things they're thinking about. I think the Ravens understand if they win this game, it puts them in position where they can control the North, but they're going to need still 2 more wins. So when you're in that situation where basically you almost have to win out, and then you're going to need some help from the Chiefs, or who did the Steelers play last week? Bengals. You're going to need help from one of those teams. I think that's going to be the interesting part of it because, again, the Ravens, in my mind at least, they have a lot more to play for on Saturday than the Steelers do. Not saying that the Steelers don't have, plenty of motivation. Not saying that the Steelers don't have, a lot to try and play for. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is if you look at both teams, it's amazing because the Steelers own all the tiebreakers. They are in a much better situation than the Ravens are. The Ravens lost a few games. It's interesting. We talk about this, but they lost a few games because their kicker couldn't make kicks, which we never probably thought we would ever say before, but it's the truth. And so as a result, there you look at where they're at in the standings and you say, it's funny, but the Steelers are in a position, really, if you think about it, the Steelers are in a position where, in winning this game, they're going to win the division. By the same token, in winning this game, they could be setting themselves up for a rematch with the Ravens in the playoffs. But again, I don't know why that would be a problem because if they win this game, it'd be what, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 11, whatever it is that they've beaten the Ravens. So I don't know that would necessarily be that big of a deal. But the Chargers have 6 losses. The Broncos have 5 losses. The Ravens have 5 losses. And so it's important, really. The Ravens are at a point now where they need, to really get moving here. And try to see if they can win this game and put themselves in that position. Interestingly enough, the Ravens, and this is how bad the rest of the division is. I mean, the Colts play this weekend, right? The Colts play, who do they play this weekend? The Titans. And the Dolphins play against, who do they play this weekend? Let me look at that real quick for you. The Dolphins play against the 49ers. If those 2 teams lose, then it doesn't matter what the Ravens do. They're going to clinch a playoff berth this week. But obviously, if you're the Ravens, you'd much rather have an opportunity to play a home game in the first round of the playoffs and win this division. And so they play against the Steelers this weekend. They have a little bit more riding on this game than the Steelers do. The Steelers aren't necessarily playing with house money, but it feels like they kind of are. Because house money means even if we lose, we still control our own destiny with respect to the AFC North. Now, there's a lot of discussion about the games and the way that they're kind of playing out. People are upset because the Steelers kind of had to play, what is it going to be, 3 games in 11 days or whatever it is. Yeah, that's tough. But the Chiefs, the Texans, and the Ravens all have to do that too. And you know what that tells me? It tells me that the NFL understands that the Chiefs, the Texans, the Ravens, and the Steelers are the teams that people want to watch. I mean, let's face it. On Christmas Day, do you want it to be like Thanksgiving Day? I mean, the Lions are obviously different this year, but for the most part, for the 30 years, we watched a horrible Lions team play on Thanksgiving Day. Or Dallas, they're not very good. And I think the powers that be kind of understood they weren't going to be very good. And so they tried to get marquee games for Christmas Day. Now, we can have an argument all day. You want to have an argument and say Christmas Day has been, Christmas Day has been the domain of the NBA for years and years and years and years, and the NFL should leave it alone unless it's on a weekend. There's something to be said for that, but the reality is the NBA showed the way, and that's the key. The NBA showed the way. They showed basically that if you put a product on Christmas Day, There are lots of people sitting around at their houses, sitting there watching, period. And so there's a lot of eyes that can get on the TV set. They want to maximize their profits just like everybody else. And they want to try and get as many eyes on their product as just like everybody else. And so we can argue that the schedule's unfair, but I don't know that it's unfair when you consider there are 4 teams, all playoff teams, that are playing the exact same schedule. And they're doing, 4 games in 11 days. They're trying to do, whatever they can do to get these teams on TV as much as they possibly can. The flip side of it is, if the Steelers, especially if they were to win the division, especially the Chiefs, because they're probably going to win the number 1 seed, but if the Steelers win the division, they go Wednesday, which is Christmas Day when they play the Chiefs. They go from that day all the way to the playoffs. They have 1 game in there Sunday, which is like 13 days later, 12 days later. And then basically they could have all the way to the next Sunday when they play their next game. So it could be a situation of where they're going to get to play like 1 game in like 19 days or something like that. And that game might even be a game that doesn't even matter. It might be a game where they can rest all their starters, so it's essentially like a bye week. So on the front end, it's probably not the most ideal situation, but on the back end, I think it is. On the back end, I think you look at it and you say, okay, on the back end, they're going to get basically a long stretch of rest. They're going to get a long stretch of being able to not have to worry about, playing any more games. They might have a Bengals game, maybe. It doesn't matter. And if the Bengals game doesn't matter, again, it's essentially a bye. Now you're talking about going from December 25th, right? And that Bengals game is on January 5th, okay? December 25th to possibly January 12th. And you only have to play 1 game in which you could rest your starters, and it doesn't necessarily matter. So to me, it all evens itself out. We always want to talk about what's unfair, but to me, it always evens itself out. But reality is the NFL isn't necessarily 100% worried about what's fair and what's not fair. They're worried about trying to get as many people to watch these games as possible. And when they do that, sometimes it isn't going to be fair. But even then, at that point, there's a silver lining to it all, which is if the Steelers are able to win, to me, if the Steelers are able to win, then all of a sudden the Bengals game probably becomes irrelevant. And you're talking about going from the 25th to maybe the 12th, which is like 18 days or 19 days or something in between really having to get ready for games. So I understand why people think it's not fair. I understand that. I understand why there's this idea that, these teams are being asked to do too much. But again, if it was just the Steelers, you'd have a case. It's not. It's 4 of the marquee teams in the AFC. I think the only team it probably doesn't affect is the Bills, right? I don't think the Bills have to play on Thanksgiving Day. So, I'm sorry, on Christmas Day. So if they don't have to play on Christmas Day, okay, I guess it's not 100% fair because they're one of the marquee teams and, they're going to be on normal schedule. But I don't know. I mean, to me, I think that we spend a lot of time and energy worrying about all that stuff. And it's going to be an important thing to note that, you know what, the NFL isn't going to go backwards. We can complain all we want to complain, but the reality is they know we're all going to watch the games. They know we're all going to watch the games. So if we're all going to sit there on Christmas Day and watch the games and they're going to do big ratings, they're not going to change that because there's no reason to change it. And the teams understand that, hey, if we're getting picked for Christmas Day, it's because the NFL thinks we're a good brand or a good team or whatever. So it's not a bad thing either if we're going to play on Christmas Day. It means that the NFL really, really values us and values our team. And so I think that that's really what's at work. So I don't necessarily have a problem with it at all. I try whenever I talk about these kinds of things, I always try and look at the big picture. And the big picture to me is the NFL saw that the NBA makes a lot of money and gets really good ratings on Christmas Day. And they said, we want a part of that too. But the only way to do it if it's midweek is to be willing to, have some of your teams play weird schedules and on weird days and whatnot. Just as it's what it is. But if you're a Steeler fan, you'd rather have your team be one of the marquee teams that the NFL wants to try and put on TV. That tells you that they're a good team, a good brand, a good organization, all that good stuff. That's what that tells me. And, is it ideal playing the Chiefs 4 days or whatever? Four days after you play the Ravens? Probably not. Is it ideal to play, for instance, the Steelers 4 days after, you play, I think they play the Broncos, and the Ravens, they've got to play the Texans 4 days after they play the Steelers. It's not ideal for anyone, but they all have to do it. They all have to do it, and that's the best part about it. That's kind of the reality of it. They all have to do it. And so I feel like it's now important really to understand that the best thing the Steelers can do is win this game. And if they win this game, then none of that other stuff is going to matter, even a little bit. Because if they win this game, they could probably even start resting guys and not worry about the Chiefs game and the Bengals game, because they're going to be the 3 seed almost regardless of what happens if they win this game. So that's what is going on there. I think interestingly enough, they were talking about Patrick Mahomes today, and that's obviously a consideration because next week the Steelers, will have to play him. It sounds to me like he's really pretty much in a good place. They are basically talking about him being able to, practice as a full participant 2 days in a row. I don't know if that's, if that's anything that's really that big of a deal for the Steelers, because I expected him to play against them. By the same token, if he plays this week and he's banged up, maybe they lose, then the Chiefs have to play him. But if they win this week, I'm looking at it, it could be a situation where, okay, they look at it and they say basically, we have pretty much everything wrapped up, so we don't have to play them against the Steelers, and that, of course, helps the Steelers. On that front for the Steelers, by the way, T.J. Watt participated in practice today. He was limited, but he's getting back. George Pickens has not. And I would say this, if George Pickens is not back, if he's not back in a limited capacity on tomorrow, I would be willing to bet he's not going to play on Saturday. Sounds like T.J. Watt's going to play, which is really important. Deshaun Elliott and Dante Jackson are both still out. But the two that are key, obviously, are George Pickens and T.J. Watt. One seems like he's on track to play. The other one, not so much. But I don't know that necessarily means that the Steelers' offense is going to be broken or whatever. I just don't think that's necessarily the case. They got to get off to a better start than they have. They've got to be able to throw the ball around a little bit, which I think they can. But it's going to be interesting to see if Pickens isn't around now that it's been 2 or 3 games or whatever it's been. How do the Ravens adjust to what the Steelers are going to have to do without Pickens? And how do the Steelers now adjust to what they did, against the Eagles that obviously didn't work out so well? I think the thing about it is George Pickens is obviously a guy who really changes the Steelers' offense in so many ways. But if he can't play, he can't play. You got to find a way to win. The interesting thing is if he can't play on Saturday, what's the chances that he's going to play against the Chiefs? I mean, this could be a thing where we don't see George Pickens until the Bengals game. And again, if the Steelers win this game, there's a really good chance the Bengals game doesn't matter if the Steelers find a way to win this game. So we might not see George Pickens to the playoffs, which is fine. At that point, he'll be fully 100% healthy and ready to roll and rested and all the good stuff. So, it's so critical in so many ways for the Steelers to win this week just because it gives them options for the last two games of the season. It gives them the ability to do some different things for the last two games of the season. That's really the reality of it. By the way, the game is always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on the Carson Street. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings Monday through Thursday. It's home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. Get down to Archie's and enjoy a really good time, a really good meal when you get there. Tell Archie I said it. Hello. I think that the one other thing when it comes to the NFL, I'm looking at the playoff picture for the AFC, and it is absolutely incredible to me that this picture kind of went into focus probably about 3 weeks ago and hasn't really changed. I mean, the 7 teams who have been in playoff position have been comfortably in playoff position for 2-3 weeks. Part of that is because the Colts and the Dolphins and the Bengals and the other teams that are sort of on the back end of it, they just keep losing games, and they have enough losses that they haven't been able to put themselves back into the conversation. But it really sort of underscores this year sort of the haves and the have-nots. At least if you ask me, it does. I'm not saying the Broncos and the Chargers are great, but both of those teams have figured out how to win enough games that, they're going to get to the playoffs. I mean, the Chargers, one of the things about the Chargers, and I get it, they have a really difficult they had a really difficult game this past weekend where they got blown out by Tampa. But one of the things about the Chargers that, I think is really important as well is they have right now 8 wins. And I look at the back end of their schedule. This week they play the Broncos. That's a difficult game no matter what. But after that, they get the Patriots and the Raiders. So 10 wins seems to me to be, where they're going to be. And really, 9 wins is all they're going to need to clinch a playoff spot. But for the Steelers' sake, now really these last 3 weeks is about figuring out not whether they're going to be in the playoffs because they already clinched. Are they going to be at home, and which of those 3 teams are they going to play? Denver, Baltimore, or the Chargers. The other scenario, I guess, that could happen, the Ravens win this week. The Steelers lose to, say, the Chiefs and then beat the Bengals. The Ravens win out, so the Ravens are the 3 seed, and the Steelers are the 5 seed. I guess they could go to the Texans. But I think if you look at how it all is going to play out in so many ways, it feels to me like the Steelers are going to play the Ravens, the Chargers, or the Broncos, and those are all 3 teams that the Steelers have proven they can beat. One of the things about them against Baltimore that I think is very clear every time they play is they've got a really good plan, and they've got the players to stop Lamar Jackson. They take away his biggest weapon, which is his threat of running. And if you take that away from him, he's not going to beat you standing in the pocket passing. I mean, I love guys that, want to point to his passing numbers, and they say that Lamar Jackson, well, look, he's thrown for how many yards this year? It proves that he can throw the ball. Yeah, but if you look at a lot of the throws that he makes, it's on the run, it's throwing the ball down the field, it's, teams that are sold out to stop him, not being able to protect on the back end. And that's where a lot of his yardage in the passing game comes from. That's not to say he's not a good passer. It's just to say he's one of those guys where if you make him one-dimensional, I honestly think if you make him one-dimensional, you can beat him. And that's what the Steelers have been able to do against Lamar Jackson time and time again. So to me, this weekend shouldn't be any different. They're able to control the line, the offensive line, with guys like Cam Hayward up front. They've got 2 edge rushers that are really good at containing Lamar Jackson, and their linebackers run really well. And as a result, Lamar Jackson doesn't beat them with his legs. And if he's not going to beat you with his legs, he's not going to beat you. It's just how it is. If you're sold out to stop his run, if you're sold out to stop him and you don't have any help on the back end, yeah, he can beat you. But the Steelers don't seem to ever worry about that. They're okay if he hits a couple of big passes as long as it doesn't get to be too many big passes. So that's where this game is at. What's at stake is very simple, and that's basically just what's at stake is that it is the AFC North championship basically for the Steelers. For the Ravens, it's a chance to clinch the playoffs and keep themselves alive in the AFC North race. That's that. As an aside, and switching gears here real quick, there's a lot of discussion about the college football playoff and the fact that Penn State hasn't sold out. And actually, I think the Indiana-Notre Dame game is sold out, but the other games haven't sold out yet. And I think this is one of those unintended consequences that nobody wants to talk about when they're in a rush to throw together something new. Okay? If you're a Penn State fan, they got SMU, they win, they got Boise State. If they win, they get, I don't know, who is it, Georgia or whoever they – okay? If you're a Penn State fan, you got to look at that and say, I only have a limited amount of resources. I don't have a ton of money. I got enough to maybe go to one of these games or two of these games, but I got to choose what I'm going to do. So I'm going to watch the first one on TV. If they win, I'll think about going to the second one. Or I might save all my money to see if they get to the semis because I think they should be able to handle Boise State in the second round. That's what goes on with these playoff games. And I don't know there's a better way to do it, but I think that there's a lot of people who are basically jumping on Penn State and they're having fun at their expense. For one thing, if you look at the other games, Texas, Clemson, right? They're not exactly close, but Clemson's in the South, and you know what? At the end of the day, it's got a huge fan base, and they travel really well. Texas obviously has got a huge fan base, so the proximity from Clemson to Texas is not horrific, if you're trying to make that trip. I'd imagine you could drive to Charlotte and fly to Dallas if you wanted. Hell, you could drive across, Route 10 and probably get there as well. Reality is, you know what? The travel for the away team, who has a very large fan base, is not terrible. Indiana, Notre Dame, what are they, 2.5 hours, 3 hours apart in the same state? And they never play. I can't remember the last, I read about it, but I can't remember the last time those two teams played. There's no question that game was going to be a sellout or very close to it. There's no question. And then you've got Ohio State and Tennessee, two of the biggest fan bases out there. They're playing each other. Penn State, and again, getting from Knoxville to Columbus is not horrific. Penn State's playing SMU. That is not, first of all, SMU is not going to be a big fan base. They're not going to bring a lot of fans. They're not really that sexy of an opponent. I think they're good, and they should have been in the playoffs. But let's face it, that is playing a factor as well. They're not selling hardly any tickets to SMU fans. Whereas the Ohio State AD basically did a bunch of things to make sure that Tennessee fans didn't get a bunch of tickets to the Ohio State game. Penn State didn't have to do that. And so I think it's unfair to rip Penn State for not selling out because I think at the end of the day, it's a tough sell for your first playoff game. Knowing full well, hey, next week we'll go play Boise, and if we win that, then the week after that we'll go and we'll play a name brand team. It'll be a neutral site. It'll be like a bowl game. That's what I'm interested in spending my money on. There's other things too, obviously. The hotel prices in State College this weekend are absurd. Listen, this is America, man. It's capitalism. If you're a hotel in State College, you've got 8 football weekends, graduation, the arts festival, and a couple of other big events to make your money, period. That's what you have to make your money. Nobody's coming to State College in the middle of January to get a hotel, which is why I travel for basketball a lot. I coach. We stay. We went to State College one year. We went to State College and played there in I want to say April maybe. In the same hotel that's $400 on a football weekend was like $99 a night for us. It's capitalism. That's just the way of the world. So, people that are angry that they're jacking up prices, they have to make their money when they can make it, period. But again, I think the reason that it's not sold out is very simple. If you're a Penn State fan, you have to make choices about when you can spend your money unless you have unlimited resources. And quite frankly, playing at home, a stadium you've been to 100 million times against an opponent like SMU is a lot less appealing than saving your money in 2 weeks from now, traveling to a warm site, a warm weather city, a bull site, and being able to, watch Penn State play. Would it be Georgia, who they would play, or whoever the hell they would play? That to me is probably a larger part of the story. So we're going to break down actually the playoff games on Friday. We will break down Steelers, Ravens, and the rest of the NFL weekend on Friday. And then, of course, I'll be back Friday, but I'll be back Saturday after the game to break it all down and talk about what it all means. Until then, enjoy your evening. This is Post-Gazette Live. And, of course, I am Paul Zeise. I do it every night. Well, almost every night. I won't be on tomorrow, but I will be on Friday, like I said, and then beyond.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.